Welcome to Requity Insights, a channel dedicated to documenting our journey to 100 world-class communities. Welcome to Requity Insights. Today, we have a special guest joining us, Michael Scheinman, the CEO of Campspot. Campspot is a leading online marketplace and software reservation provider for RV resorts, family campgrounds, cabins, glamping options, and more. Campspot's journey began in 2015 with the mission to modernize the camping industry. Recognizing the need for more streamlined booking experience, Campspot developed a software platform that empowered campground owners to manage reservations and maximize their revenue. In 2020, they expanded their offerings to launch Campspot Marketplace, providing campers with a vast selection of instantly bookable campgrounds and RV parks. We currently are active users of Campspot on 10 of our campgrounds, and after trial and error of various different softwares, we've become big fans of the tool itself. And this is not a sponsored promotion by any means, but we definitely have been won over by Campspot thanks to their great user interface. And I think our operations team really values the sort of out-of-the-box solution that we've been able to plug and play with and quickly learn and adopt throughout the organization. So certainly have become big fans of the product over time.
Awesome. So just a little on Michael himself. Michael is an executive of more than 10 years in the travel industry. He brings a range of experience in e-commerce, technology, and corporate strategy. Before joining Campspot, he was the head of Orbitz and Cheap Tickets, two portfolio brands of online travel giant Expedia Group, and previously served as general manager to the lodging division at Hotwire, another of the group's brands. So we are thrilled to have you on the show, Michael. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thrilled to be here, Dylan and Lewis. It's great to have an opportunity to talk more about the industry and something that I think we all care about, which is data.
Definitely. Well, really lots of stuff we're going to dive into today, and I'm excited to be able to get into some of the real-time data because I think a lot of us industry participants and investors are always seeking more of that because it's been such a fragmented space. It's been hard to get our hands on good quality data. So I know you've been hard at work to educate the industry and to be able to provide more insight. And I know we're going to be able to do that on today's call. But before we get into the nuts and bolts, why don't you just start off and just share with us a little bit about how you got into Campspot and stumbled your way into this space as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you mentioned in the intro, I've lived and breathed online travel for my entire career. And one of the things that has kept me so energized and passionate about the travel industry and really the intersection of travel and technology is that travel creates these wonderful experiences where you see new places, meet new people, have new opportunities to engage with the world around us. And with technology, we're able to reduce the barriers to entry and really allow more people to experience the joys of travel, which I think makes the world a better place. When I learned about Campspot and how there was, really the camping industry being this segment of the travel and hospitality space that had been seemingly untouched by technology for much of the technological revolution of the last couple of decades, it really intrigued me. Here's an activity, camping, which is getting at truly the essence of travel experiences, but it's also something that it's kind of like a club. If you don't know how to go camping, how to search for camping, how to prepare for a camping trip, it's really hard to break into. And I loved the fact that Campspot and the team at Campspot were trying to break down those friction points and really help operators, so campground owners and operators, better serve their guests and focus on that aspect of their role instead of trying to figure out reservations or other aspects of technology. And for the end user, for the guest, how the Campspot team and the Campspot marketplace, we're really trying to make it as easy to book a campground as it is to book a hotel, a car, a flight. And so when I had the opportunity to join Campspot in early 2021, I got really excited. And when I got to know the team, which has just incredibly deep camping expertise, as well as the technology and the platform itself, which truly is cutting edge, I realized that we had something really special on our hands. As you mentioned, Campspot's been around for a while, 2015, and had the good fortune to really be backed by some of the biggest players in this space from our start, which gave us the resources and also the know-how to plan with the end result in mind. We weren't a scrappy startup in the sense of we were just trying to get the next feature out the door. We were really always intending to be the industry's leading technology platform. And now today, we're fortunate to have that opportunity to serve over 2,000 campgrounds throughout North America.
Do you have a number internally that you project to be the total number of campgrounds?
That is a great question. So there's a lot of different research out there, and I don't know that there's one number that everyone's coalesced on. The number I typically look at for North America is about 12,000 private campgrounds, so outside of government-owned and managed campgrounds. So about 12,000 between US and Canada, at least, which is where we focus. The really interesting thing, we did conduct an independent research study and found that about 50% of campgrounds that are privately owned or operated have no internet booking capabilities. So they're essentially offline. And so you could say that the space that we actually play in is that 50% that is taking reservations online, those 6,000 campgrounds. Of course, that means that we have a pretty massive share of that. But we also look beyond that to the other half of campgrounds that haven't yet embraced technology in their operations. And that number is shrinking every year, in part, I hope, because of the efforts that we've made, as well as some of my competitors in the space, which is another important point. While there are competing platforms, we're all kind of unified in this common goal of bringing the industry online, because no matter how campgrounds get there, once more campgrounds are available online, we all benefit as an industry.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, for those that are not very familiar with the software in the campground industry, there's been a ton of movement in this space, especially in the last, I would say last decade, but probably even more so the last 5 years, as the industry continues to see more capital flow into it, more consolidation, more consumers, new consumer demands, right? We move into a society that has expectations of being able to book things quickly online. And now today, I think, as we'll see, as we dive into some of the data we're going to share, over half of the bookings are taking place online. So for owner operators that are not offering that, they're leaving so much on the table. And I think consumers are probably going to be less comfortable going to a campground that doesn't have an online booking software, because it can almost become a red flag to some extent for them, where they ask themselves, why don't they have that professional software management that a lot of the other campgrounds in the areas do? So I think a lot of owners are waking up to that, and they're jumping on to a good booking platform as a result of that. You have a unique story as someone that is coming into a company. I believe you said founded 2015. So it's still a pretty early company as a whole. And you're jumping in 5 years in roughly as CEO. So how did that come about, and how has that transition been?
So the way it came about, as we mentioned before, Campspot was founded by actual campground operators and owners. And that is, I think, the best way to start a company in an industry, is to actually be an end user of it. As Campspot got bigger, the team and leadership that was managing the company also had their campgrounds portfolios to focus on, and so made the decision to really invest in growing Campspot as an independent company. And that entailed bringing on independent management. And so I was approached by a recruiting firm about this opportunity back in mid-2020. I was still happily at Expedia, leading Orbitz and Cheap Tickets, large legacy travel brands. Was not really looking to make that leap. But to my earlier story, just the sheer scope of the opportunity at Campspot was too big to ignore. And so what I found in evaluating the opportunity to join Campspot was really that the team, both the leadership and the investors and an actual boots on the ground team that was managing the day-to-day, had this wonderful combination of knowing what they knew about the camping industry and about what it needed, but also knowing what would be needed to add to that skill set and that expertise to take Campspot to the next level. And, those aren't needs that are entirely filled by me. Through hiring me and other senior leaders that we brought onto Campspot subsequently, as well as just growing the team overall, which has doubled in the last 2 years. What we were trying to do was complement the industry operational experience with the experience of distribution and marketing and e-commerce, because the insight that the Campspot founders and leaders had from really the beginning is that to be a true technology platform for hospitality providers, you can't just focus on the person behind the front desk checking in guests, making reservations. You also need to build with the end user in mind. A long-winded way of saying that's what led me to join Campspot and for our team to grow in the way that it did.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about that. And generally, I see that as a big positive that the company was founded by actual people in the space, living and breathing this, as I believe that is the best people to solve a problem, is the people that understand the problem better than anyone else. And, to my comment earlier, I think that is certainly one of the most noticeable strengths of Campspot is the user interface, both on the side. It is very good for the people that are behind the desk booking, but also for the customer itself. So yeah, I definitely think that is noticeable that it was built with sort of the e-commerce mindset and skill sets behind the team to be able to think about it from a true kind of B2C platform to help influence online bookings and whatnot. And also that goes even further when you start looking into the other features you guys offer when it comes to upsells and different fee structures and different ways to be able to monetize on customers, while also giving them more options and a better experience at the same time.
Absolutely. And something that kind of gets easily forgotten in this story of Campspot's founding and growth is that the pandemic had a major impact on the camping industry overall, and it really opened the door for technology and for platforms like Campspot to play such a big role. Because if you think about it, with the pandemic, you had on the consumer side more people than ever wanting to go outdoors and wondering why it was so darn difficult to book a camping trip. And then on the operator side, you had campground owners and operators trying to keep up with new restrictions and regulations, trying to manage cash flow challenges and stabilize their businesses financially. A lot of things that influence campground operators to think differently about the way that maybe they'd run their business for decades. And so the convergence of those factors is really one of the things that allowed Campspot and some of the other platforms in this space to proliferate. Again, we never have looked at this as a property management system or an OTA marketplace or a point of sale, but really as a full service technology platform solution to connect those two groups, the campers and the campgrounds, in a way that our industry hasn't had the chance to do previously.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, Michael, thank you for sharing all that background with us. I think it's probably a good moment to lead into, I know you made a presentation for us on industry trends and insights. If you'd like to share your screen with us and maybe walk us through some of those data points.
So before I get into the data, I want to spend just a moment talking about why I'm sharing this data, which in some other companies might be considered proprietary or something they'd keep internally. I mentioned earlier that really the whole industry benefits when the whole industry comes online. I think the same is true of the whole industry benefiting when we all have transparent access to what's going on in the industry. So if I think about the evolution of what Campspot's tried to offer to the industry, it did start with owner operator centric, operational utilities, a software platform for campgrounds. The next step was with our marketplace, a distribution platform for campgrounds to really help them get access to a wider array and audience of customers. I think this next evolution, this next step that we're just really touching the surface of, is arming campground owners, operators, investors, industry thought leaders with the data to make smarter decisions about how to take this industry forward. Campspot, I mentioned earlier, works with over 2,000 campgrounds, I think 2,200 to be exact. So we by no means have access to data for the entire industry, but we happen to have probably more access than any other source that exists. So we've started putting together roll-ups, aggregate anonymized views of industry trends, data, insights, and sharing them out to our partners as sort of a benefit of being part of the Campspot platform. But we really have a grander vision to get this data out to the masses and not have it directly tied to Campspot, but really just have Campspot be a leader in pushing for more transparency and data. So some general disclaimers, all of this is going to reflect Campspot campgrounds that have been active on our platform for more than 12 months. This is all aggregated content that is anonymized. I say this to really hammer home the point that this doesn't necessarily reflect every campground. It doesn't necessarily reflect the average campground. The campgrounds that are using Campspot are going to skew toward a more tech-forward, larger, full-service type of campground. But I think there is sufficient variety in the campgrounds on our system that this is still going to be directionally interesting. So I actually want to start with some data that is not Campspot specific. I think all of us in the industry have realized that 2023 is not as strong of a year from a demand perspective as 2021, maybe not even 2022. So we saw this huge surge of demand during the pandemic, and now there's a sense that it's leveling off. And when we look at actually Google searches for camping, which I think is a good proxy for general consumer demand, we see that articulated very clearly. So what you're looking at on this chart is the Google search query index, people that search for camping during the months of January through May by year. You don't need to make sense of the actual number. It's just a relative index. What matters more is the comparison of that number year to year. And so you have 2019, which is kind of like the last normal year in camping. It was a 46 index. 2020, at least the first half of the year, did see a dip. If you drill into the data at a more granular level, you see that really the lead up to COVID and into March, demand tanked because nobody really knew what was going to happen to the world. And then as we get into April, May, demand starts to surge. But for January through May, there was a dip in 2020, huge surge in 2021, more camping demand than has ever been there on record. Last year, we saw that level off a bit. And then year to date for 2023, we've actually seen a dip of about 7% year over year, which is even a greater dip versus 2021 and even 2019. So I think the first point to make here is that stepping out of Campspot or the campgrounds that are represented with the Requity Group or anyone else listening to this call, the demand for camping from consumers seems to be down year over year. The question is this a new normal, or or are we going to revert to sort of a higher than 2019 but lower than 2021 middle ground? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great.
So now drilling into what this means for campground occupancy and rates. So this is now Campspot data. And the first chart here, the green bars, this is site nights that are on the books for future months or have been actualized year over year. So for example, When we see the -1% for January, that means that
Just to clarify, for those that aren't familiar, we use the term site nights to represent occupancy. So when he's referencing the site nights, he's representing the number of occupied nights, the number of booked nights for each particular site. So for instance, one site could have 30 potential site nights. And if we have 15 site nights, that would be 50% occupancy for that particular month.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. And this is also same park. Well, it's essentially a proxy for same park data because the Campspot system has been growing, so we didn't want to skew the numbers with that. And so it reflects campgrounds that have been on the platform for more than 12 months. And so when we look at like January, 1% down year over year, that means that the average park on the Campspot platform had 1% fewer site nights stay in the month of January versus January 2022. When we look at future months, like for July, this is as of the end of May, how many reservations were on the books, how many site nights were on the books to stay in July versus at the end of May 2022, how many site nights had been on the books to stay for July 2022. And so what we've seen is a pretty consistent decline between 1% and 2% year to date. July is currently on track to be the biggest decline year over year, but we have that tracking throughout the rest of the year as well. One thing that's interesting though is that coming into the month of May actually looked worse than it finished at. And so that is one sign of optimism as we really saw a surge in the month for the month bookings toward the back half of May as we neared Memorial Day. But I couple this chart with the one below it. ADR stands for average daily rate, which is the average price point for the campsite itself paid per day for these site nights that we're talking about. And you can see that it's really an inverse, whereas every month in 2023, we right now have a year-over-year decline in site nights or in occupancy. For average daily rate, for price point, we're seeing increases year over year, anywhere from 1% to 5%. So when I talk to campgrounds and campground companies, I mention, yeah, this is really looking like a softer year. In some cases, I get the response of, no, it's not. The year actually is looking better than last year. And I realize the disconnect is I'm talking about demand. They're talking about revenue. So demand, occupancy, certainly down year over year. Many campgrounds have been able to compensate for those declines by increasing rate, which is excellent from a financial perspective. You can obviously drive better bottom line performance through rate than through occupancy because there's less variable cost associated with charging more money for the same site. But I do caution a bit here. We've seen this in the hotel industry, downturn after downturn. First demand drops, but then price sensitivity really kicks in. And I do worry that some campgrounds are pushing rate too aggressively. It might actually exacerbate some of these occupancy declines, especially in a year where the macro environment is so uncertain and customers are under so much pressure from inflation and other economic factors.
Yeah, I love that. And I'd love to just chime in here for a moment. This is such an interesting, it's super helpful to be able to have this kind of insight. And just speaking more big picture, if you look at so many other industries out there, there's so many short-term rental owners out there that rely on sources like AirDNA or similar sites that help them with all of their revenue management, where you have to be extremely active with understanding how to adjust your pricing to be able to accommodate for the competition in the area and supply and demand. And in campgrounds, that's the hard part, is we're oftentimes going around with blinders on, not really understanding or not having as much data to be able to help support our understanding of the supply and demand. So I think that even this snapshot alone, even though it's nationwide, can still be insightful for us when it comes to our revenue management strategies. And the two pieces of insight I wanted to hit on here is you already actually stole one of them, was the fact that it's such a delicate balance when you're thinking about revenue management. You're constantly juggling your price point and your occupancy. And we've been skewing towards lower ADR, higher occupancy recently, especially with the headwinds that we're up against just across the country. We think that it's a safer time right now to be offering affordable stays to guests and taking on more long-term stays, taking on even for the shorter term stays, making it more affordable and going for higher occupancy, repeat guest experiences rather than trying to be pushing price right now, because I would rather have the same income and 80% occupancy than have the of income and 60%, all things factored in. Obviously, you have to think about your expenses and that side of the equation. But if NOI was the same, I'd rather take the higher occupancy strategy right now, especially because this is a fairly low CapEx asset class as a whole. You're not putting that much extra wear and tear on it by having higher occupancy. So, for us, that's been a big piece of our strategy recently, is trying to just constantly monitor our pricing and try to really be gearing more towards pushing our site nights up. And, and I also want to mention, to caveat this page, right, there's so much data coming in here, and many of these campgrounds on the platform are what we'd consider to be stabilized properties that have been under the same ownership for many, many years. And, they may just be operating kind of at market, or there may not be much going into driving value. For us, when we look at our portfolio, we have, I believe there's 4 properties that we've had on Campspot for over 12 months. And the last time we checked, we found that our effective gross income was up 34% minimum at each of these 4 properties for the year, with some of them up as much as 100%. So those are properties that are earlier on in the value add strategy. So it's not that we're buying in better markets than the nation. I mean, hopefully we're buying in good markets, but it's really more of a function of we're buying deals that have some kind of a value add component that we can be able to operate well, to be able to drive additional occupancy or additional revenue, or find ways to improve the sites and create value. So I think when you look at, you have to always think about your investment strategy when you look at this, and you can't just assume that no matter what, you're going to buy a deal and see that your occupancy is going to go lower if this trend continues, or your revenue is going to go up in accordance with this. Oftentimes, I think a lot of investors are value add investors that are trying to find parks that are not, campgrounds, parks, resorts that are not being managed as efficiently as they could be. And therefore, rather than relying on the market to create your fate, you're finding ways to be able to influence your fate through effective operations.
Yeah, very well put. And as you were speaking, it just, made me think about more contrast between the camping industry and the hotel industry, because this balance between ADR and occupancy is age old in the hotel industry. And as we have more operators and investors coming from the hotel industry, I sometimes try to remind them of some of these key differences that impact revenue management strategy. And I think I'm going to cover all 3 of these in the subsequent slides here. But just to preview 3 big differences. One is that the booking window for camping is significantly longer. And so whereas hotels can keep rate high, and then they have plenty of time to drop rate if occupancy isn't materializing because of that last minute demand, that exists to a lesser extent in camping. Second key difference is the opportunity for ancillary revenue. So of course, hotels have restaurants, some have spas, other ancillary products, but the camping industry definitely has, full service campgrounds at least, have more of an opportunity to monetize the guest on site than hotels do. And I think the third factor that's really different is that in the hotel industry, because booking hotels online is so ubiquitous at this point, the consumer has full visibility into the comparable options, whereas in the camping industry, we don't. And comparable options is also a trickier concept in camping because you're not unlike the hotel industry. You don't have 5 big box hotel brands in a 1 block radius. So those are all differences and all reasons why the same playbook doesn't necessarily work in camping. Granted, all 3 of those things are changing to a certain extent, which I'll show on the next few slides here. So I mentioned booking window. So booking window is the lead time. It's how far in advance a guest is making their purchase from when they're actually planning to arrive. And something that I think is maybe one of the most interesting trends we've seen is that the booking window, many booking trends changed between 2020 and 2022 and then have reverted back to pre-pandemic levels. Booking window is one that has not really reverted back. And so I would venture to say that the decrease in booking window, the increase in last minute bookings is a change that our industry has sustained permanently. And I think it probably will continue to go down, even if you don't see it in 2023 data. And so on average, between 2023 and 2019, customers are booking about a week shorter in advance, which I think is really interesting. If we just look at 2023, though, January through May versus January through May of 2022, that share of super last minute bookings 0 to 14 days, the share has actually decreased. And some of that you can owe to just weather situations throughout parts of the country. Again, we're talking January through May at this point, but I think this is going to be something that's really key to keep an eye on. And I don't think there's a universal application of what it means for a given campground. I think it means that these campgrounds that are stable assets that have been operating their businesses the same way for years or even decades, need to relook at some of their philosophy around pricing and marketing, because the consumer behavior is definitely changing with regard to booking window. Another thing that's interesting to look at is the share of bookings by site type. And now here's where I'll bring back the caveat that Campspot does not necessarily reflect the average campground. We skew much more toward RV-centric campgrounds, whereas if you were looking at, for example, state and national parks, skew much more toward tent camping. But within the Campspot platform, we have seen year to date the share of bookings to RV sites relative to lodging and tent sites continue to grow, especially if you compare it to 2019. There's definitely been a shift toward RV. And Dylan, you mentioned earlier the kind of the incremental cost of servicing an RV spot is quite low, especially relative to lodging and cabin accommodations. So I think there's a lot of great margin power in RV, and if you get it right, it's also I think a very lucrative offering. So we've always skewed more toward RV, but that skew is continuing to accentuate. And then the share of bookings that have moved online, I think this is really dramatic. That we look at pre-pandemic 2019, less than half of the bookings for campgrounds on Campspot were coming through campground websites. The rest were coming through in-person or phone bookings. Flash forward to today, year to date, we're at more than 2/3 of bookings coming online. That's a combination of Campground's own website, as well as the Campspot marketplace and any other distribution platforms that we're connecting campgrounds to. But generally, I think it's safe to say that this is driven by the consumer. And the camping consumer, whether it's the same consumer who's becoming more familiar with technology, or whether it's a new entrant, a new type of consumer coming into the space, there's definitely a growing preference to book online, which makes the online booking experience, having a user optimized experience, having a modern platform like a Campspot, but there are many others. So I don't want to be too self-serving in this presentation. Just having a great online presence is more important than ever before.
Yeah, I thought that was a really impressive number.
And I alluded to on the last slide, the Campspot marketplace, which again is Campspot's offering for consumers, where you can go on campspot.com or download our mobile app and shop from among all of the campgrounds utilizing the Campspot marketplace. So similar to an Expedia or an Orbitz for camping. And that gives us a different lens because it shows us where customers are coming from and what they're searching for. So when we look at marketplace bookings, one correction here, I say marketplace bookings, this is actually marketplace searches. So marketplace searches by user origin, or where the customer, where the guest is searching from. We do see some interesting regional trends. So Florida, California, two of our largest search destinations. Florida is flat year over year. California is actually down significantly year over year. Texas as well is down. Where we're seeing year over year growth in searches is users coming from the Midwest and the Southeast, as well as some of these other pockets here. Notably, searches from outside North America, which is not a huge share of our business, but it is down significantly. And so I wonder if this is just a hypothesis, but in 2022, one of the potential reasons for the decrease in camping demand was that people who had avoided airports and hotels for a couple of years during the pandemic had that kind of revenge travel mentality and wanted to get back to their traditional forms of travel. I think in the case of international travelers, 2022 was really the first year that customers could come into the US from out of the country in wide numbers. And so maybe 2023, that's kind of gotten out of their system and they're doing their revenge travel with more domestic hotel, flight, et cetera. Just random hypotheses. If we look at where customers are going to, so park bookings by destination, this is a heat map of the US. I removed Canada just for just that the story was cleaner. But year to date, at least, we're seeing the best year over year performance really in the North and Northeast, and the bigger declines in the South and Southwest. How do these trends, I guess, compare to what you guys are seeing with your portfolio?
So for us, again, it's a little bit different because with most of our campgrounds still being in their first 2-3 years, a lot of our campgrounds are still reaping the rewards of the marketing efforts and the operational efforts that we've done with pouring into the campgrounds and putting capital improvements in and things along those lines. So I think we are overall, though there may be some decline, macro in some of the different states that we operate in. Like if I look on the map, it looks like North Carolina, which is our biggest state. It looks like it's orange and it shows that it's up 5% year over year. So it went up maybe slightly, if I'm reading that correctly.
Well, and so the one on the left is where the user's coming from. The one on the right
is where they're going. Okay, so orange would be, it's basically saying the marketplace is saying that there's a slight increase of marketplace guests from North Carolina booking through the marketplace, whereas the right would be that there's a decrease in the actual park bookings, right?
Yeah.
If it's orange, I'm assuming. So yeah, I mean, I think as a whole, we have seen slowdown on certain communities that we have where we can see year over year using the analytics tool, we're able to see that there are not as many bookings 3 months out as we had at this time last year for some of our transient sites, but not to the extent where it's concerning yet. It's more so to the extent where we're looking at how do we want to proceed with our pricing strategies and be thoughtful on, hedging against that through bringing in more monthly guests and again, kind of going back towards more focusing on occupancy and getting loyal customers that are going to keep coming back at an affordable rate. I think that's been our biggest our biggest stance on operations, and it's interesting to see some of the states that you see doing better in the Midwest, because we've recently we have 2 campgrounds in the Midwest that we've purchased, one probably 18 months ago and one more recently. But we've seen so much demand there in general, and there just seems to be a huge demographic in the Midwest that loves RVing and loves camping. So I think in the right locations, it's great to see that you're seeing that kind of growth in the Midwest. I think I was telling you before this, I was surprised to see some of the numbers in some of the states in the Midwest. But I think it's a really positive sign that camping is big in the Midwest, and it's in really, really healthy shape. And then I think the Southeast is always going to be strong, but maybe there's a decrease due to just like you mentioned, kind of going back to the norm after a few years of it booming and everyone traveling after post-COVID, who bought RVs, everyone taking trips down to Florida and out to the coast and that sort of thing.
Yeah. And by the way, with camping being so popular in the Midwest, it's no surprise that that's where Campspot was founded and is based. So we definitely love our RVing here.
I bet a lot of it too is probably influenced by people staying closer to home as well, right? I think when there was a lot more work from home going on and people sitting around during COVID, they probably weren't more likely to take trips to the coast or to Texas or to some of these more destination locations. Whereas now it's probably reverting back to being a weekend camp trip, or they're searching for seasonal sites anymore nearby their homes, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't have the data in this deck, but one of the interesting insights we've seen is that our customer base is really divided into those that are consistently booking campgrounds within 100 miles driving distance of home, and then those that are doing 1 or 2 big trips a year where they're clearly flying or doing a road trip all the way to the destination and they're farther out. We actually just launched a new dashboard in the Campspot analytics tool for our customers, where campgrounds can plug in their campground and see where their customers are coming from on a heat map like this. And so you can kind of see, like, are there pockets of geography that represent a disproportionate share of your customers? So I think it's putting the geographical lens on it is a really interesting way to think about revenue strategy and marketing strategy.
Yeah, it's great.
So we touched on this a little bit earlier. Again, campgrounds have the unique ability to sell add-ons and drive ancillary revenue more so than hotels. And this slide's not meant to be all-encompassing, but one of the innovations that Campspot really brought to the market was the ability to offer additional value-adding services to campers during the online booking process to drive ancillary revenue on top of just the site price. And so there's a few examples of this. One is what we call site lock. So for those that aren't familiar, on Campspot and on other similar booking sites, you typically are giving the guests an opportunity to select a particular site that they want to stay at. So not just a site category, RV site that has 50 amp hookups and is back in, but also actually giving the guest the chance to say, I want site 25. And Campspot brought really that innovation to market with the ability to have the guest pay a little extra and guarantee that site, as opposed to choosing a site category or choosing a site preference and either risking not having that when they check in, or the campground leaving money on the table. So on average, the average campground is year to date making $66 in site lock revenue per site. That's up quite a bit year over year. And so what this reflects is that even those campgrounds that are keeping their base rates a little lower are finding ways to get more monetization through, for example, raising their site lock fee. I'm going to flip to the third one here, which is add-on revenue. So add-ons in the Campspot world would be the ability to sell like firewood or bags of ice or golf cart rental during the booking process, and then have those available when you check in. We all know from e-commerce that the closer you can move those decisions to the initial buying decision, the higher attach rate you're going to get. And so this was another innovation that Campspot brought to market. And we see the average campground is generating $188 in add-on revenue per site. Now, this growth is not entirely organic. We have introduced on Campspot more types of add-ons that you can sell in the booking process that we didn't have last year. So it's a little skewed, but I think the point still stands that this is another way that campgrounds are maybe compensating for some of those occupancy declines without pushing ADR. And then you'll see the only one of these that's declining year over year is grid optimization. And what grid optimization is, this is unique to the Campspot platform. So there's guests that have locked their sites and can't be moved from site 23 or site 24, whatever they paid for. But there's also guests that are not going to pay that extra, and they're just going to be confirmed in a site type, which means the campground has discretion to move them around. And what grid optimization does is that whenever someone searches for a new reservation, whether it's a reservationist or whether it's a user shopping online, and there is there isn't a single site available for the duration of their stay, but there is availability at the property overall, grid optimization dynamically will move unlocked sites around, kind of playing a game of Tetris to accommodate that new booking. So to really maximize the occupancy for the park. And I bring it back to this chart, which shows that so on average 2022, the average campground was making $33 in extra revenue per site. And this is from reservations that would have otherwise been turned away if an optimization hadn't happened. I would suppose that the reason it's probably down year over year is because campgrounds have fewer occupied sites. And so there are fewer cases where a site needs to be moved around. So that's the one of these metrics that's down year over year.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense. And yeah, I think it's good to break that down even for campers to see, because the site lock, there is a need for owners, or there is a reason that owners will charge for it, because they will be losing money if they let you lock your site for free, because it just makes the whole campground run much less efficiently, because you'll have all these site locks that are locked months in advance. And then if you have people that want to come in for particular dates, it makes it really difficult on the campground owner to be able to maximize their occupancy. So I think it makes a lot of sense to be able to offer that way for those that are truly interested in a particular site, that's still an option that's available to them. And they can offset that by having a site lock fee in place. And with the add-on revenue, I would guess, I don't know if you have the numbers, but I'm guessing that golf cart rentals have to be a good chunk of that add-on revenue. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. Yep.
One of the larger pieces of it. And then also, I think, I don't know if you want to hit on more recently, I believe you guys, did you come up with an insurance offering of some sort to be able to help protect against bad weather? Do you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, I wish I could say we're the ones that came up with it, but we're really just one of the first use cases in the camping industry. So we're partnering with a company called Sensible Weather. And what they do is offer, it's not truly an insurance, but it's an insurance-like product where, let's say you're booking your campsite, you're offered a chance to pay a little extra. I think on average about 10% of the total site rate. And if you pay that weather guarantee rate, then what that means is if it rains during your stay doesn't get canceled. You still have the campsite, but you get refunded for the portion of your stay that it was raining. In some cases, the entire stay. And so I actually think it's better than an insurance product because for the campground operator, if a guest has paid for the weather guarantee, you still have the site occupied. You don't have to do a refund of any kind. And the guest has more money in their pocket to spend at your camp store and other ancillary products. So that's why I think it's great for the guest, great for the campground. We also it's obviously a monetization opportunity for the campground. You're getting some of that revenue that the guest is paying for their weather guarantee.
Yeah, that's great. It's a win-win.
So I just have one more slide and then happy to take any last questions, but this is really just a summary. Look, 2023 is a really unique year and we're not even halfway through it. We had this pandemic fueled surge of demand that really accelerated a lot in our industry. But obviously not everything has changed permanently. Some of those booking behaviors, I think booking window is an example of one. Online booking share is another. I don't think those are ever going back to pre-pandemic levels. In fact, I think they'll continue to shift in the direction we've seen them. Campgrounds are now trying to figure out what to do with the first years for many of them of occupancy declines in 3 or 4 or 5 years. Many of them are making up for the occupancy declines with higher rates, but the warning is that these are price sensitive guests and we don't know the limits of their price sensitivity. So non-booking revenue opportunities like add-on revenue, like insurance type products are great ways to stabilize revenue without turning away guests. And I'm a travel e-commerce guy at heart. I have to close with the fact that an ever increasing share of bookings is moving online. And so that coupled with the fact that the pie is probably a little smaller this year than last year means that for a campground to get the same or a larger slice of the pie, it's all about online presence, marketing, user experience, and distribution. So with that, I'll stop sharing and see if there's any last questions or discussion topics to round this out.
Yeah, no, I think that was pretty comprehensive, and thank you for that, Michael. I do have one question, and it's probably not something you can give direct specific on, but on one of your slides, one of the first ones, we saw that the demand is kind of lower, at least that reference number is lower to pre-pandemic numbers. Like, what do we attest that to? Is that more a state of the economy? I know that specifically that slide showed that it was referencing the word camping. Can we also attribute some of that to a shift in the campground or the camper himself, who's now searching more for things like glamping and RV resorts? We are seeing a shift in that more higher end product. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great hypothesis. I don't have a good answer to this. I can speculate. I think your thought is a good one. I also think the year's not over. And if we look at full year 2023 versus full year 2020 versus full year 2019, I would expect to see similar demand levels. I think we're facing two factors right now. One is the rebound post-COVID and some of this surge really being temporary. And so going back to pre-pandemic norms, but then that's also coupled with the first softening of the macro environment that we've really seen. I mean, take pandemic out of it for a second, but like otherwise, this is really the first negative economic event we've seen in quite a while. And so I would, if you look pre-pandemic at camping occupancy, camping demand, every metric that I've seen, it was consistently growing in kind of the mid-single digit percentage numbers for the last decade plus. I expect that trend to continue. I think what we're seeing right now, first half of 2023, is a knee-jerk reaction to the economy and things going back to the way they were pre-pandemic in more ways than that was happening last year.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
makes sense. Yeah, I was going to share similar view that if you look at, I think it goes back to the 1970s, the data that shows the growth rate of camping as a whole. And of course, camping has transformed a lot, but the growth rate has been super steady, and it is not usually something that ebbs and flows dramatically with market cycles. But I think we just are in a very unique time period where COVID was a very unique event that definitely favored camping, and therefore got a lot of eyeballs interested from both a consumer and an investor standpoint. But I perceive this as we're going back to the norm, and we would feel comfortable projecting a similar growth rate to the last 10 years, the next 10 years, right? Would taking COVID's influence out of the picture. And of course, we can't necessarily, we're not in the business of making predictions and forecasting, but definitely, I think a lot of the investors that we speak to share similar sentiments that this is just sort of a rebound after having substantially higher growth after the unique circumstances that COVID brought into play. And I also want to just repeat the point I made earlier about, if you're an investor, I think you have to think about your strategy and realize that if you are a value-add investor, or if you're someone that is operations focused, the real opportunity in the campground world, in my opinion, is improving campgrounds through value add opportunities. And buying something and just completely putting yourself at the whim of the ebbs and flows of the market is generally not going to produce nearly the same kind of returns that buying something that is maybe either mismanaged, not perfectly efficient, or has additional expansion opportunities or upside opportunities. I think will always be a safer bet in the long run, because you're able to somewhat have control over your fate by being able to influence the improvement in the income and the value you're able to create. So always just want to make that point as we head into the uncertain time period that we're in.
Great point.
But yeah, I think that's about it. Michael, anything else on your end?
No, I really enjoyed the opportunity to have this discussion, and I think you guys are doing a great service for the industry by inviting speakers on and asking some of these questions that are bigger picture. I'll go back to what I said earlier. The more informed we all are, the more we're all thinking collectively about how to evolve the industry and how to make the experience better for everyone, operators and consumers and everyone in between. We all benefit from that. This is a large, dynamic, usually growing industry, and I'm just amazed at how much it's transformed even in the 2.5 years since I've been in this space. I can only imagine what the next 2, 5, 10 years are going to bring.
Awesome. Michael, we also want to give you the opportunity to let our viewers know where they could find out more info about you and also about Campspot.
Yeah, I'd say the best way to do that is to just go to campspot.com, download our mobile app, or follow us on any social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok for the more business focused folks on the call. LinkedIn is where we publish some of our research and other industry focused pieces. And yeah, would love to connect with more of your listeners and viewers, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can.
Awesome. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And yeah, we look forward to staying tuned in with the Campspot Insights as they come out. And hopefully our guests got a lot of value for the show. I'm sure they will. Tuning into another episode of Requity Insights hosted by our team at the Requity Group. You can find recordings of all shows along with our opt-in form to set up a call and view future investment offerings on our company website, therequitygroup.com, also listed in the show notes.